We have Susan King. She's principal at HED, and she's a past president of Chicago Women in Architecture and the author of Only Girl Architect Lonely. It's in the great book called Chicago Architecture, Histories, Revisions, and Alternatives. If you haven't gotten it yet, we have a copy for you here. So I thought we could talk about first, I want to start on a personal note. And this was a great way that we always start interviews, especially when we're doing research for this exhibition. I'm also always curious about activism in architecture and how activism informs your work. Each of you guys have a specific activist angle to your practice. So I wondered, what was that moment for you? And maybe we can start with you, Susan, and then come down the panel. When you saw yourself moving from being maybe a passive participant in the profession or a non-activist to having that aha moment and realizing there was something that you needed to do.
So do you want to know when? You want to know when and how? The context?
I wonder what the moment was.
Okay, what was the moment? What was actually, I was not that, okay, I guess I'll answer it in two parts. When I graduated and moved to Chicago and was working at my first jobs, I was actually at Perkins & Will to begin with, and some of the architects in the room would know that firm. It's interesting to me looking back on that because Chicago Women in Architecture, there were a group of women at Perkins & Will at that time that were really involved with CWA. And they kept trying to get me and the other younger women, oh, come, we're doing they did power lunches. So this was 1987. So come to our power lunch. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't consider myself a joiner. I thought, what do I need this CWA for? I don't understand. So now about fast forward 5-ish years, I was getting my license and all of that. I was at a smaller firm where I was one of the few women most of the time I was there. And that's when I started to get it. Now they call that the pinch point, kind of, and that's when a lot of women either don't pursue their license and maybe leave the field entirely. So that's where it was for me, but I'll also tie it into this. I'm so excited and honored really to be here and to be on a panel with Catherine Anthony and everybody, you guys too. But there's a video of the Carey exhibit around the corner here. And while I was at this small firm where I was only, one of two women, I received this invitation to this Carey exhibit that was happening here in Chicago. And it was CARY was the acronym for Chicks in Architecture Refuse to Yield. And I was like, what is this? How did they find me? How did they get my address? And I went with some of my friends to that exhibit. And that was a turning point for me. And I didn't even know there was a video. So I was all excited. I didn't know there was a video of this. That led me to CWA, back to CWA. And I became very active there, working on looking at historic women. And so I'm going to share more of that probably later in the discussion. I don't want to get into it too much, but I think maybe that kind of answers. It was 5 to 7 years out, being the only woman in an office, and what goes along, all of the things that go along with that, realizing you're not being treated equally. So,
hi. So my name is Mitha, and I guess I'm thinking about this. I've always had the personality of someone who wants to fix things, whether that's small relationship issues or just talking. Anytime there's an issue, my take on it was, I guess I should try to fix this. And it never occurred to me that some people might not approach everything that way. And I think it was, as it relates to the profession, it was while I was in college and learning architecture and about the design process, just seeing how much of it tended to focus towards luxury architecture and, learning the statistic, 99% of architects design for 1% of the world. And to me, that was very easy to dismiss. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to design for such a small part of the world and not be doing things that influence more people? And I guess as I progressed through school, I was just informed more and more like, that's nice and all, and we'll teach you about that, but you're not going to actually do that. That's not what architects do. We're not particularly interested in that whole actually doing good. It just seemed like it was being dismissed, the whole concept of making sure that your work has a positive social impact. But to me, I knew that I was going to have to look for something special to try to figure out, how am I going to take this incredible knowledge that I'm gaining. I'm so thankful for my knowledge in design and in architecture. So how am I going to take that and apply it in a way that makes a difference for people? And that was when I was in Miami. I moved back to Chicago, and I do remember being at my first NOMA meeting, and I was shocked at how big of a community it was. There were a lot of people from a lot of backgrounds, not even all architects, across the design and construction industry. And they were all different ages. There were students, there were people who had been in the profession 30 plus years. And everyone was there just to talk about, well, how do we propel this somewhat, I don't want to say ignored, but definitely underrepresented group through the industry, and how do we raise up our communities? And that was when it kind of clicked for me, like, okay, this isn't that weird. Like, there are other people who see issues and want to fix them, and it felt good to see that within the design industry and within architecture. So I think it was twofold for me in that way, that it started that I realized there was just something about my personality that wanted to do that, and then it continued on and was really ignited once I came to Chicago and became a part of NOMA, where I felt that there was more of a community and a base to try to seek out that type of work.
So I'm Vaselka, and my story is a little bit different because it starts from when I was about 5 years old. I come from there's a lot of generations in my family that are male architects, carpenters, GCs, and since, when I was really little, I don't want to say I was discouraged into going in the field, but I really was. I don't think they did that because they thought I would be bad in the field. I think they thought I would be a really good architect. I just think they had experience and they knew what it was going to be like, and that it would be a lot harder for me than for them. And it would be a lot harder to be respected in the field. It's come a long way since then, but I think we still have some work to do. And I've just been, I don't want to say angry, but I've just been working towards that equality for a really long time. And I think it's sort of an honor to be in this exhibition right now and part of the timeline, but that's honestly what started it.
So I'm Catherine Anthony from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for our hosts as well for organizing this tonight, and thank you, audience, for coming on a Friday night. When I saw 6:30 to 8:30, I said, these are going to be dedicated fans who can come on a Friday night to come to an exhibit and a panel like this. So hopefully we'll keep you entertained and not eat too much about food that you're not eating. But anyway, you'll be eating later, I assume. But I just wanted to say a couple things in terms of the aha moment. And I've had a number of them over the years. One of them just happened when I walked in here, because I just thought, okay, I've been to this, I've been to that, I've been to that. I'm not that old, but I wasn't quite in high school at the start of this 1968, as far back as it goes. But I joined up around the middle of the page over there. Anyway, 1981 is my first reference there. So it's been interesting for me to see our history laid out like this as an evolution. And I'm really pleased, Sarah, that you were able to put it together like this, because I think there's some real value in seeing it as a timeline and how ideas progressed. I've had several aha moments, as I mentioned. I've written a lot about restrooms. Some of you know gender and family issues in restroom design, particularly in public restrooms. I was a very fussy customer from age 3, apparently, while traveling with my parents in Greece. We have a member of the audience who's from Greece here, and I have relatives back there. So we used to go and visit this family to visit my relatives at the time. And I guess I refused to go to several of the facilities, and I gave my parents and my relatives there kind of a hard time. That got me interested in that subject, I guess, from a young age. Then fast forward to several years later, I was accompanying my late husband the very, very last week of his life. He was in a wheelchair. He had had cancer for 7.5 years. He was struck at a very young age. Ooh, today's the 13th of September. Today was the day, now that I think about it. September 13th, 1993. I almost forgot. Today was the day. Anyway, my whole life changed on that day. Anyway, that's the day he was struck at age 38. He passed away at age 46. But the very last week of his life, he was in a wheelchair, which he had not been prior to that. And we needed to go places. And he needed to go to the restroom. And There was a men's and there was a women's. And he could not propel himself with the wheelchair on his own. So he had to be with me, he had to be as a man in the women's room, or I had to be as a woman in the men's room. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with this? Something is not right about this. And it made me feel very awkward and very frustrated. And I thought, wait, this is me, this is us right now. This is just for a few days, but what about all the other people who are affected by this all the time? So that year, I can say, was exactly 2001 when that occurred. And so that was, again, this reawakening of the restroom issue, which has been something that, as I say, I've been writing about, and it's gone on ever since. In terms of the architectural practice, I worked for a very large architecture firm in the Bay Area, and it was laid out kind of like this big open space. And I remember it was very cold in the office. They hadn't turned the heat on one day. And a group of us a couple of the females went to complain to the boss that it was too cold in there. And so he picks up the phone, the boss picks up the phone, we'll remain nameless right now, picks up the phone, and he calls the building manager and he said, hey, so-and-so, I want you to turn the heat up. I want my broads to take off more clothes. And I thought, okay, what do you do in a case like that? I mean, today, Me Too, this and that, turn him in. There'd be all sorts of things, but not then. You just sat there and you thought, okay, I don't like this guy, but I want a job. So, and I need the job and I already have the job. So I'm just going to sit there and take it. But that was bad. There were a few incidences of unfair treatment on that job. And I will also say I had a few incidents of unfair treatment at my university job as well since that time. That also alerted me, not only unfair treatment to me, but unfair treatment to others who were underrepresented that I noticed at the time. So anyway, there were things like that happened. And then CWA also played a role. I attended a retreat in Galena, Illinois that took place around 1990 or so, whenever it was. I'm trying to think when exactly. But I went to it. Everybody was sitting in a circle talking about their experiences in the architecture firms. And I was really struck by what I heard and the stories that people were saying. Many had a lot of good things happening. They had very good experiences. But those who had some negatives, they were really shocking. And that's also what got me into wanting to do this kind of work. In addition, I attended also an African American task force through the ACSA, our Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, at a conference there. And so I heard from that side of the story, some of the issues dovetailed, what the women architects in CWA were concerned about, what the African American architects were concerned about, also dovetailed. Not all the same kinds of issues, but there was enough overlap that those were all aha moments, I would say.